Hey guys, it's Judy from Nutrition with Judy. Thanks for joining me today. While you're here, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening to this on podcast, please make sure to leave a review as this allows my content to get in front of more people. And thank you for that. My name is Judy Cho and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition, and I focus on root cause healing, and that oftentimes starts with the carnivore cures all meat elimination diet. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Coach Danielle, or Coach Dani. We talk a lot about how sometimes healing is beyond just food. We talked about the mental health side and focusing on things that we can heal from our past, including trauma. It's an important discussion to listen to, especially if you have not healed enough and you are still living in a lot of the stress that may be part of your lifestyle. Maybe the way that you are viewing the world is something that we need to work on, and it's beyond just the food. Dani is a sugar freedom coach and speaker who's passionate about helping women reshape their relationship with sugar so they can reclaim control over their health and energy once and for all. Having struggled with sugar addiction herself, Dani knows exactly how difficult and overwhelming the journey can be. Using her extensive knowledge in nutrition, personal experience, and coaching, Dani helps her clients navigate sugar cravings and guilt and no longer allows them to control their health and life. Dani is the host of the top-rated Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast, where she dives deep into conversations about the root causes of sugar dependency and total body health and wellness. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Let's get right into it. Hi, Dani. I'm so excited to have you on. I know you and I have talked so much offline and through the Sugar Summit, but I'd like for my audience that may not have heard of you or seen you get to know you better, because you have so much knowledge and wisdom in the wellness space, as well as just the body mindset that can really support people in healing. So for the people that may not have heard of you yet, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Judy. I'm so excited to come to your audience and to share, whatever I can to support in this journey. So, hello, everybody. I'm Dani, as Judy said, and I've been working as a holistic nutrition coach and sugar freedom expert, I call myself, for the last 6 years, having kind of morphed out of my own journey and battles with a lifelong addiction to sugar, to processed food, to really just escaping and coping with what I now knew are my inner wounds and my old patterns. That was really what I used food to run from and to escape from. So in my own journey and kind of uncovering, accepting that, I had this addiction and this dependency really on processed food, about 6 years ago. My husband and I were actually traveling in South America, and I often joke that we went through an accidental sugar detox because we were living in the middle of the jungle, just eating off the land. And that was the first time in my life I feel like I haven't had access to processed foods, and my body was in shock. What is happening? Where's the cookies? Where's the junk? And, that was really eye-opening for me. That was a really, really eye-opening part of my journey. So coming back to Canada after that trip, I really started seeing things differently and really started putting the pieces together around how I thought I was nourishing my body, but I was not. The truth, I really had to get honest with myself that, I was eating more junk than I thought, and what that was actually going to do to my future. And, taking a hard look at that was really a catalyst for me to start going down this path for myself. And over the years, now having worked with women in this space for 6 years, I've really seen a lot of the mistakes that most people are making when they're trying to eat healthy or trying to change their health. And really, my obsession quickly developed around really getting to the root cause of why we eat what we eat. Because so many people, and I see this especially in the sugar addiction space or this processed carb addiction space, there's a lot of people toting that it's just about abstinence and it's just about getting it out of your system and then all of your problems will go away. And I tried that. And I guided my clients through that. And guess what happened? It didn't stick, right? It didn't work. And I became obsessed over really getting to the root cause and understanding a deeper reason why we're actually using food and why we as a population can't seem to really overcome or get into a healthy eating pattern in a way that is lifelong or is just a new way of being, instead of, the yo-yo dieting and the binging and that roller coaster that so many women I know are on. So that's kind of got me to here. And now, I help women really, really uncover these root causes of their dependency on sugar or processed food, and ultimately heal their relationship with themselves. Because little teaser for, I'm sure, what we're going to talk about later. That's really where it all comes from.
What is it about, I guess, sugar and processed foods that really does affect our mental health and just our wellness in general?
Yeah, this is big, and I'm sure you've talked about this a lot on the episode as well, right? And on your show. But for anyone who isn't aware of this yet, I mean, really important to understand that these. I can't even use the word food, right? These aren't foods anymore. The processed food industry and Big Ag, has really taken over in a powerful way to pump our grocery stores full of chemicals and full of highly processed substances, sugar being a big part of that. So there's a lot. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this, but, really just scratching the surface here for all of you. When we are overloading our bodies since childhood on processed food, on sugar, this includes things like maple syrup and agave and honey. Can't tell you how many people think, well, I don't eat sugar, and they're just downing honey every day, right? I used to do that too, and I'm like, that's still sugar. So the white processed carbs, the bread, the pasta, the cookies, of the obvious places, but also these hidden sugars that are in all of our food. And when we bombard our body with this, I want you to start thinking of like actually just bombarding your body with toxins. So what do you think is going to happen, right? We're going to increase the toxic load in our body. We're going to dramatically change the landscape of our gut, and do a lot of damage to the microbiome in our gut, actually causing some of the quote unquote like bad bacteria to overgrow, to cause digestive issues. We're having, of course, the obvious incredible damage to our blood sugar, right? And our insulin and our pancreas, and this beautiful cycle that is there to support the use of simple sugars like glucose in our body and in our blood. But when we're bombarding it at such a toxic level day in and day out, we really wear down that system, right? And this is leading to things like metabolic disease, insulin resistance, diabetes, obviously leading to cancers and obesity and heart disease. Like a lot of we're now seeing the research start to come out on how inability and the damage that's been done to our blood sugar regulation actually causing these metabolic dysfunctions that are really at the root of a lot of chronic diseases and a lot of pain and a lot of inflammation and just a lot of things. And then on the other side, continuing this conversation, there's the damage that it's doing to our brain, right? We look at the world around us and we see this, and this isn't the only cause, obviously, but there's this massive increase in mental disorders and anxiety and depression and stress levels. And, a huge piece of that is drastically being affected by what you're eating and the sugar high that you're getting every time you are spiking your blood sugar in that way, hijacking our dopamine centers and our serotonin centers, and just absolutely, wreaking havoc in our brain and our ability to even just experience joy and experience pleasure and experience these peaceful moments in life, right? We end up sort of being on this roller coaster and feeling more moody, like we have PMS all month, even though maybe you don't even have a cycle anymore. So what's really going on there? And a lot of those mental disorders or those challenges, I wholeheartedly believe are really stemming from what we're eating and what's being put in our food. So sugar being a huge culprit of that. So there's just a couple things that you really need to pay attention to. And this is why this is such an important topic.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our community, and I would even argue that most of Americans or even Canadians know that eating like Pizza Hut and McDonald's and these foods all the time is not good for us. But we still see that. I saw a study not too long ago that Twinkie sales are increasing over the years, right? And I think every single person on the planet would say Twinkies are not a good food, yet it's increasing in sales. So what is it? And I think this is something you were alluding to earlier, but we know that a lot of the foods is not good. We know that added sugars, generally speaking, is not good. And most people do know that the added sugar really has no benefit for nutrition. So what is it that is making it so hard to give up these foods?
Yeah, this is like the $1 million question. I'm so glad, because that we're going to go down some major rabbit holes here, because this is really the bread and butter, pun intended, of everything that I do. So what I've seen, especially when, okay, there's kind of two things here. there's the very physical, real things that are happening in our body when we eat processed food, right? Processed food addiction and the hijacking it's doing to our brain, the blood sugar dysregulation, the changing of our gut lining, all the very physical pieces that are keeping us hooked, right? And the sad truth is the food industry knows this. They know that sugar is addictive. They know that, processed seed oils are addictive. They know that these things have addictive qualities in the body. And they know that the more they pump into their product, the more you're going to come back and spend money buying that product. So unfortunately, the sad truth is we do live in quite a corrupt world in that regard. And it's really important just to be aware that that is going on and really accept the truth that the food industry and most of these organizations do not have your health at heart. That's not their goal. Their goal is to make money. And it's our goal to empower ourselves with that knowledge and choose different products, right? Choose to cook, choose to make our own whole real food. So this is a really big piece of the puzzle for sure. That's keeping us back. We know that Pizza Hut's not good for us. I love that you said Pizza Hut because that used to be my go-to. Oh my gosh, the breadsticks, like every week, sign me up, right? And they know that, right? That is going to keep me coming back for more and spending my money. So there was a very physical, addictive cravings and behavior. But what I've seen and, is hands down the most powerful driver for us in keeping us hooked on these foods, making it so difficult for us to give them up, is the way that they have been used and integrated into our emotional and energetic bodies. So what I mean by this is that we have been taught since childhood to use junk food to manage every single emotion, to really to soothe, to numb out, to escape, to feel safe, to feel loved. Like there are so many patterns that we have developed and relationship ties that we have developed with junk food, with sugar throughout our whole lives, literally starting in childhood. Right. Like that first year in our life, right? The first time you get ice cream because you were good, or, you got a good grade and you're celebrating with food. So these psychological, emotional, and energetic ties that we have to candy, to sugar, to the taste of sweet is the biggest driver. And this is where I see no matter how long women go off of sugar, or people go off of sugar, right? They could be sugar-free for a year. So physically, they're not having the cravings, but there's still a craving there. And this is because those deeper patterns have not been healed, have not been shifted. And it's understanding these deeper rooted reasons of why we're actually reaching to food, because we're uncomfortable in social situations, or because we never received the love that we needed in childhood. And now we're using food as a replacement. Now we're overeating to self-soothe because we can't handle the pain that we're feeling in the relationship that maybe we're in. So the coping mechanisms that we've developed and the attachment that we have there with food, especially junk food. I mean, we have not been taught to escape our pain using cucumbers, right? Or a steak. Like that's not something we're taught. We're taught the ice cream, the wine, the junk food, and it's so entwined in our culture, our society, our rituals, holidays. It's built in such a deep-rooted psychological way that it becomes really tricky to navigate our way out of it. And you almost have to be the black sheep in the family if you're choosing to eat healthy food, right? It's not the norm. You're the weird one. I'm the weird one in my family that brings my own food to dinner. And I'm grateful that I don't mind doing that. But I know a lot of people that's very uncomfortable, right? And, all of these pieces make it so complicated to finally break free. Not impossible, just complicated.
I know when I first went without sugar and I'd go to a social event and I would feel the social anxiety about what if someone asks like why I'm not eating the pizza or why I'm not having cake. And so I already feel that insurmountable amount of social anxiety. And then some of that happens. And then I feel all that manifestation of fears comes true. And then I feel even more anxiety leaving it of, oh, now they're going to think I'm the weirdo. And oftentimes then that level of anxiety would then almost make it's like I would end up coping by binging because, see, I was trying to be good. My fear of being teased or ostracized became true. And therefore, now the only way to handle all of this emotion and anxiety is to go home and binge. And I would often use purging, but then I would not. And then I would just self-soothe that way. And so it just became this vicious cycle of, I think a lot of people go through that. And you see it even as the first birthday, we have most babies feeding breast milk all year long, and we're so careful with the diet of a baby. But then as soon as they turn one, it's like, yes, now you have a birthday cake for your first birthday, and you see the smash cakes and all of that stuff. And then you start year two, you're feeding them chicken nuggets and applesauce. And it's like, what happened to the perfect diet when they're a baby? There's no difference when they're 2 or 3 years old. And like you said, it's just every event, you celebrate with food, you get sad with food, and then it's all over media, billboards and TV, and you learn that. And sometimes the way I dealt with it, because I didn't deal with the emotional side yet, was I'd be angry at either caving in and eating the sugar or being mad that I got bullied and why did I even feel these emotions? And I'd self-soothe by binging off of sugar. Knowing all of this, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening and watching this still go through some of that. Like, how do you start healing those old patterns?
Yeah, thank you for sharing those examples. Those are so common. So common. And this is, I first of all, I want everybody listening to know that there's nothing wrong with you, right? This relationship that we have to food and unhealthy food is extremely complicated. It is a messy relationship that we have been really confused about our whole lives, right? We're constantly being bombarded with mismessaging or different messages. One year it's this, one year it's that. And different people saying different things and getting sucked into this fad diet and this fad diet. And we're confused. And, that lifetime of confusion, of back and forth and trying to figure out how to get a handle on this has left so many women feeling like it's something wrong with them. And I just really want to hit that message home that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. And this place that maybe you're in of feeling lost and feeling like, why can't I get out of these self-sabotaging patterns? And, I do so good at the party, like you said, Judy, and then I come home and I binge because I was feeling so anxious, or I'm celebrating that I did so good at the party, right? Like these wirings and these neural pathways and ways of behaving are very deeply ingrained, right? This is really something that's been happening for all of us for decades, maybe 40, 50, 60 years. So it's going to take some time to shift out of that. And I would like to offer, what I've seen here, and there's so many ways to kind of get started with this, but step one is to just start getting curious and starting to ask yourself better questions about why am I actually turning to food, right? Why in this moment do I feel like I need to go and eat a tub of ice cream? What is really going on? And really deeply bringing awareness without judgment. This is really important because when I'm just going to say this because we need to break free from this idea that eating healthy is a fight and that it's like this war that we have to have with ourselves. I know so many women, actually all of my clients that I work with are like coming to me because like, I want to end this fight. Like, I want this to be effortless. I want this to just be easy. And, it is possible to really come into this journey for yourself with compassion and with gentleness and with ease and with understanding and allow this to unfold for you. So step one is awareness, right? And really, really getting clear on asking yourself these better questions around why does this addictive pattern exist for me? What am I trying to escape? What am I using food to cope from or to avoid or to elicit? Sometimes we're trying to elicit, more joy, right? This is a big trigger for a lot of my clients is food being the only joy in their life, right? Well, sugar is the only joy in my life. So why would I give it up, right? And that's a problem that food is the only joy in your life, right? So now it's about getting curious about how to create other sources of joy, right? So we can start to really get our feet wet and understanding like, okay, the emotional triggers we have, the reasons we're scared. Well, every time I hang out with my mom, somehow I'm wanting to eat sugar. This is really great feedback and information. And then from there, I would highly recommend working with someone, whether it's me or someone else that Judy recommends or someone else that to help you start diving deeper into your childhood wounds. So this is really, really a big, big area that we all need to start. And it's so stereotypical. It's like, tell me about your childhood, right? People come to my first session with me and I'm like, tell me about your childhood. And they're like, wait, am I in therapy? And that is a really important part of this because our perceptions of who we are and how we behave start in childhood. And we have all had some sort of trauma in childhood. And I say that because I used to think trauma was only big T trauma, but that's not true. we all have some sort of trauma in the way of energetics or not receiving what we needed in childhood. So for a lot of people and of all of our era, I mean, this is a sign of the times, is we weren't honored in our emotional expressions. We weren't told we were loved. We weren't really held when we were crying. I mean, as simple as that, an infant crying, not being held is actually a patterning of I'm in pain and I need help. And this person is not going to be there for me. My person who's supposed to keep me alive is not there for me. And the imprint that actually causes well, I must not be lovable. I better keep my emotions to myself in order to get the love that I need. There's a lot of survival mechanisms that start really coming in those first 7 years of life and kind of shape our belief systems, how we see ourselves, what we believe about ourselves, whether we're worthy or enough, when we start developing a lot of these core wounds. And as human beings, no one's immune to this. Like, so I say confidently, we all have some sort of patterning that happened in childhood. That is why we are now people pleasing, why we are now binging on sugar, why we are now, engaging in unhealthy relationships. There's a reason for all of that. And really getting messy and getting into that work is tricky, and it's hard, and it's emotional, and it's big stuff. And I know you know this, Judy, with the work that you've done. And that's why most people don't do it. And and I want to encourage everyone here. It doesn't have to be jumping headfirst into all of your traumas, right? It can be really going slow and dipping your toes into understanding where these patternings are coming from and why you're having such a hard time connecting with yourself, right? And really knowing who you are and all of this. So there's a lot there to unpack, but that's kind of, I just want to share that to kind of get people started.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. I think even going through my own trauma with my eating disorder and then using food as comfort or using food as a tool of why didn't I speak up for myself, and then self-harming that way and just, filling my food body with just toxic foods. And then the purge was almost and the purge can be many different mechanisms. It could just be overly fasting, or it could be compensating by overly exercising or having a certain body shape, because then maybe you're validated, or then maybe you're getting approval. And there's a lot of different things like that, but it is easier to just eat the food and not think about it. And maybe you just haven't found the perfect diet for you that will make it stick, and then you won't have to worry. And it's so much easier to do that then think about, well, why am I picking up the food? And that was a lot of what eating disorder therapy did for me, which was very beneficial. Not the food itself they were teaching, but just the figuring out, well, why do you want to be a perfectionist? What is it? Is it that you don't feel you're good enough? And that was where a lot of my things stemmed from, was unless I was a certain weight, unless I looked a certain way, unless I did X, Y, Z, I'm not good enough to be loved. For people that are watching that are scared to even go down that path, right? Maybe they know deep down there is some big T type of traumas that they've put under the rug. What are some baby steps that they can do to start figuring out? Because I know you said ask some big questions, but do you do that in the heightened state of you're ready to go all into sugar eating, or do you do that when you're calm? Like, how do you do some of those activities?
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. I would really recommend starting around those times when you're wanting to eat sugar. Maybe you've already binged, or maybe you've already eaten sugar. You're noticing that unhealthy pattern. And I want you all to just start getting curious about that situation. So maybe even after, right? Being like, okay, sitting down with your journal or even just closing your eyes and tuning into your body and taking a minute to get curious without judgment. What went on there? Why did I eat that tub of ice cream? What emotional state was I in? Or what was I trying to get out of that? So even just bringing in the habit of checking in with yourself in that way after every binge or after every, unhealthy snack is going to really start tying for you together the understanding of when you're eating because you need food and nutrients, when your body actually is hungry, versus when you're eating for emotional or energetic or other reasons. And 90% of the time we're eating for other reasons. 90% of the time, and this is why we're overeating, we're snacking, a lot of that is psychological cravings, right? So we need to start building that awareness around cravings. So I would recommend really just getting curious about those cravings and starting to ask that around the time of when it happens, because you're in it more, right? So maybe you just had a binge and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to sit down with my journal now and just get curious about why did I feel like I wanted that? Or why did I feel like I needed that? What was going on for me today? And just starting to keep track of that over time without judgment, like just being an investigator in your process here, because over time, you're going to start to really see some patterns and you're going to start to notice, wow, it's every time, I've had a stressful day at work, or every time, I felt like I was shamed by someone, or, what's really going on for me there. So yeah, I would recommend starting around that time and building that as a habit, as a foundation. And then of course, if you're ready to take it to the next level, like getting some actual support and working with someone to help you guide, because what's happening is, our belief systems and this lens that we see the world through we have our blinders on, right? We're never going to be able to see. And this is why, I'm so passionate about always working. I always have a coach and a therapist, and like, I'm always working with people because I know that I still have a lot of blinders and I want somebody to mirror those back to me. So we don't heal through this stuff, especially if there's big T trauma, but even just being willing to start with the little stuff, right? Maybe the little T trauma, right? And noticing like, oh, okay, so my mom wasn't affectionate, and for me, for example, this is a bit of my story, is like, as I'm unpacking this in the last few years for myself, I realized that my mom always had a massive emotional wall up. I never saw my mom cry. I never saw her, share emotions. And for me as an infant and a child, that left me feeling really unsafe energetically, because I wasn't fully connected with my mom heart to heart, right? She had a wall up and I felt it energetically. As children, we feel that. Mm-hmm. So I felt unsafe. And I developed severe separation anxiety for a good 10 years of my adolescence. And in that, my solution, my primitive brain was like, I'm going to try to control everything because that will make me safe. And then I started, engaging in these really unhealthy control mechanisms and trying to control situations and people, and which, as we know, is impossible. And it just caused me more anxiety, more anxiety on the back end. So it wasn't really helpful. But in that inner turmoil was what was driving me to escape, right? With sugar and food. Like, I can't handle this. I'm not actually in control. I'm trying to control things. I'm anxious. I'm just going to have food and sugar to numb out. So, just having someone that can guide you to start seeing those patterns and start understanding them with compassion, I think is a really great place to start.
And I feel like I went through a similar thing where if I didn't have a therapist, I wouldn't have realized that a lot of my small habits were perfectionistic habits from a self of not being good enough. And it took someone, like you said, to mirror and ask me these questions that would drill down to this fear of being unloved or unaccepted. I've heard so much about some women, maybe they got raped in their past. And so the way that they self-protect is by overeating. So maybe they have a unhealthier shape. And it's really at the core of it, it's to protect themselves from ever feeling, possibly getting desired by the opposite sex or maybe even the same sex. And so that would never happen again.
Yeah.
That's a big trauma, right? So for somebody like that, maybe they start looking at the little T's to see when they're turning to food, but would you generally recommend them working with a coach to start breaking down some of these walls?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many things that we can say here too, because we have to be careful, especially when it comes to diving into some of these bigger wounds. We really, really, really have to be held in safe space.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who aren't trained or aren't familiar with how to actually help people navigate. And this is something that I'm even right now in the middle of practicing and learning and studying more in somatic coaching and somatic therapy, because I understand that this is a delicate subject and this is something that is very tricky. So making sure that if you are seeking, support, either a coach or a therapist or a counselor or whoever you're going to see, just really making sure that they have the training and they have the experience and they have the ability to hold you in safe space, because unfortunately there are a lot of people out there who don't. And the last thing we want is for you to be re-traumatized or to not be held in that safe space. And this is especially important because and I know you wanted to chat about Gabor or something here, because this is like really important. And for those who don't know Gabor Mate, look him up. Amazing. He's an expert on really like this link between trauma and addiction, and really understanding that a lot of our traumas have actually come from being alone in our pain. So we need to, in order to heal from those, we need to actually be in connection to actually navigate and walk through maybe the pain, maybe the heartache or the loss or the grief or the fear that's stored in our body and be able to actually process that out in a safe way. And working with, the right person is going to be extremely important for that.
Yeah, I think it gets tricky to find the right person. Like that's the core thing. And maybe people could reach out to you and you have a network that you work with and stuff. But I do know that there are people also that feel that, oh, I don't have any trauma from my past. So they're so disassociated from anything that's happened. So it even takes even more work. And so every single person will be different. Some people may need somatic, some people may need limbic, some people may need group therapy, and it's all different. But it sounds like the first step is to start being aware and curious of why you're turning to food.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And I will say this really boldly. We all have trauma. We all have trauma. I know this. Because I used to be that person that was like, I had a great childhood. I'm good. I didn't have any, I don't have what I would consider any big T trauma. Okay. And then when I started learning about little T trauma, I started learning about what trauma actually was. I realized that, to 4-year-old Dani, not feeling connected to her mother and not safe was a big T trauma, right? And these little instances, it can be a moment, like the moment when we were on vacation in Mexico and I got sucked under a wave and I thought I was going to die, right? Like these little moments actually imprint in a huge way in our nervous system. And for a younger version of ourselves that doesn't understand the world, right? As soon as we don't feel safe, we feel our life is threatened. That's a big T trauma. So whether it was actual sexual abuse or war or a car accident or your parents dying when you were young, like these traditional things that we think of as big T trauma, which obviously can have a bigger impact. There's a lot of areas that we have never thought of as trauma before that actually are, right? Not actually being held as a baby could be considered a trauma. Not actually being supported in your emotional expression, right? We're taught to just shut up and go to your room if you're angry or if you're crying, right? Stop annoying mom, get out of here, right? Like we're that disconnection and being alone. Like if we're having a painful experience as a child, maybe we got bullied at school or we're just having a really sad day and we're crying and our parent isn't there for our caregiver's not there for us. That in itself is a trauma. So I just want you to open your mind to what that could be and understanding that we all have something. We all have multiple somethings. I know this for a fact because I was that exact person that was like, I don't have any trauma. I'm good. I had a great upbringing. And then I've started unpacking things and I'm like, oh man, there it is. There's those things.
So then what does for someone that's never looked at food in this way and just, I just can't seem to not eat certain junk foods, or maybe I'm craving it and they just think it's a craving. Like I just really like sugar. What are some of the symptomologies maybe of when you may be turning to food for something other than just for nutrition? After a very stressful day, you seem to turn to food. After you have a fight with your husband or spouse, you seem to turn to food. Like these are some of the symptoms that maybe you're turning to food for other than just nourishment.
So some of the maybe like the most common patterns, right? The most common. Okay. So yeah, you've mentioned a few for sure that are key. I would say paying attention to like when you eat, right? If you notice that you need snacks throughout the day or you have to have something sweet at the end of a meal, that's not true, right? Either you're not getting the nutrients you need, which could be a thing, but usually it's an emotional reason that you're eating. So there'll be like the late night snacking. I know a lot of my clients end up in front of Netflix at the end of the night, just totally disconnecting from life. There's also the real like obsession of food, right? Like thinking about food all day long. Like when am I going to get my next snack? When am I going to have my next meal? What's this? What's that? And just noticing if your mental capacity is being taken up all day long by food. Some of the other things to really just recognize is, again, like as you start collecting that information every time you're eating something or every time you're maybe eating something that's not nourishing for you, as you collect that information, you're going to notice your own unique patterns showing up. But a lot of them are exactly that. It's like, I'm escaping something. So there's some sort of difficult emotion that's coming up. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's stress from a busy day at work, and you're going to food. So it's really a unique process, and it's unique, but also not unique, and really uncovering what those specific pathways are for you. But for most of us, it shows up as that. It's like coming home at the end of the day and just like needing to snack on things, or mindlessly snacking, eating in the car, ending up at the drive-through, not even knowing how you got there, right? Like these sorts of things that, are really common. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just really important to be aware of it and to start asking the right questions to to uncover what's really going on there.
So do you think that most people can't stick to diets because I'm assuming that everyone's eating sufficiently? So it's not like it's a calorie deficit. And so therefore the body's saying you need nutrition. But let's say it's all diets are relatively equal in calories or nutrition levels. Do you think most people are not able to stick to a diet of one that's has more whole foods, less sugar because of all of this other stuff that's going on?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And this is where I say like, it's so much more than the physical. In my opinion, like the 20% is the like physical addiction and the physical stuff. But once we get that under wraps, it's this 80%. It's the social pressure, the need to fit in, our emotional connections, our traumas, our, lack of self-confidence, our social anxiety, our like mental state, like all of these, like the fact that most women I know don't love themselves. Like this is a huge, huge area as well that we need to walk tenderly into, because this is, the shame that we feel in our body, the guilt that we put on ourselves, the lack of kindness that we give to ourselves, like all of this complicated story, it drives us to food time and time again. So yeah.
And I mean, I'll be the martyr of the episode, but I was in a bad relationship a long time ago, and I remember that I couldn't get out of it, or I wasn't strong enough, or maybe I felt like this person was destined for me and they're not ideal. And then I would just go through binge purge cycles, and that was the way I was coping, because I would get mad at myself, and that's how I would sort of be punitively damaging to myself. Or if I got mad at that person, then I would even use it as a tool against that person of, well, now I can't see you because now I'm sick today. And it just became a tool. And some days, like you said, it was celebrations where all my coworkers are going out, and it's like, Judy, live a little. Why can't you have some alcohol, or why can't you have some dessert when everyone else is having it? You're not going to die eating a little bit. And so either I would cave in, or then I would binge behind closed doors and be mad at myself. And so for every emotion, there was always food along the journey. And even when I try to get off sugar, and maybe we could talk a little bit about this, then I would carry all these sugar-free candies 24/7, trying to self-soothe with these, I guess, fake sugar candies and products. And then eventually one day I'd be at a breaking point and I'd go wild with the real junk foods. Yeah. So why is maybe just using sugar-free substitutes not always the right solution?
Yes. I love this question. I'm so glad you asked, because I'm so passionate about this. I see this happen all the time. Oh, yeah. And, I hesitate to call it a mistake, but it's something that there's no mistakes here. We're all learning and growing, and everybody has, I fully believe everyone is on their own journey and has the right to make their own choices in this. But what I see is, right, when we're replacing, sugar with a sugar substitute, we're not ever actually getting to the root of the problem. We're just replacing it, right? So now I'm celebrating with something sweetened with stevia instead of like actual sugar. So the pattern is still there. We're still giving our brain the hit of something. And most of these alternative sweeteners are 100 or 1,000 times sweeter than actual sugar, right? So our brain is still, and our mouth is still getting a hit of sweet. And we're still perpetuating the pattern of, when I feel uncomfortable in my body, when there is a difficult emotion coming up that I've never been taught how to handle or to be with, I need to get out of this. And I'm going to use stevia instead, right? And I'm going to use, and yes, some of these don't have the same effect maybe on your blood sugar, but maybe they have other effects that are even more damaging, because a lot of them are just chemicals. Yeah. But we're not really getting to this nitty gritty deep root cause and the repatterning. And that only really happens when, and I know you do a lot of this with just stepping into the carnivore diet, right? When we actually remove our crutch, we got to face the music. Yes. Right. And this is the hardest part for a lot of women, is like, now my best friend isn't here. My crutch isn't here. My bowl of ice cream isn't here. This is hard. Right. And this is where most women will cave back in, because they don't have support in navigating those tricky emotions that start to come up. The tears start to flow. The anger starts coming up. And we don't know, and we haven't talked too much about this specifically, but a big part of what I do is helping women ultimately learn how to feel again. We have been so disconnected from our bodies and taught to disconnect from our bodies our whole lives, right? We've been taught not to trust our intuition, don't trust our bodies, trust media, trust the marketing, trust the packages on the food at the grocery store, trust your doctor because he wears a white lab coat, right? So we're totally disempowered our whole lives, and we need to start taking that power back and learning how to actually listen to our body and what it's telling us. I wholeheartedly believe like our body is always talking to us, and it's always telling us what's right? And when we binge on sugar, we feel like crap because our body is telling us that's not something that we want in our body, but we don't listen to it, right? So this journey of kind of tuning back inward is a big one. And a big part of that is learning how to feel again. We've all become very disassociated from especially what we would consider, and I don't use this term, but the negative emotions. I don't use that term because emotions aren't negative or positive. They're emotions, right? So they're not bad or good emotions either. Let's not use that language, because we need to understand and relearn that every single emotion is very important and vital. And there's nothing wrong with feeling sad or depressed or grief or anger. Nothing wrong with it. It's part of our human experience, but we have never been taught how to actually be in that emotion in our body. So when those emotions come up, it is terrifying. It is, in our messaging in our brain goes, this is unsafe. Get out of it as quick as possible. So let's go get a dopamine hit with some sugar or a glass of wine or whatever the vice is, right? So this is a huge root cause of addiction, and something that Gabor talks a lot to is this like inability to actually be in our body and know that we're safe, feeling pain, feeling difficult emotions, and knowing how to actually support ourselves through that without needing to escape, right? So this tendency to escape is one of the biggest patterns that we need to heal and work on. And this is really rooted in our body. So learning how to reconnect with our body, learning how to actually feel again. I know so many of my clients come to work with me and they just don't even feel anything. They don't know what joy or sadness feels like. There's this block. And that's a protective mechanism that our ego and our subconscious put up because it wasn't safe to feel in our childhood. So we have to relearn that it's safe to feel and learn how to actually be in those feelings in our body and know that we're not going to die. Because there is this part of our brain that thinks we're going to die. If I really let myself feel this anger, I'm not coming out of it. Right. And that's not true. It's not true. So relearning how to connect with that, I think is some of the biggest work. And you can do that on your own as well. I mean, it's really tricky and it's really difficult because it can feel unsafe, right? So having someone to support you with that is important. But even just noticing the next time you're feeling stressed, or the next time you're maybe watching a sad movie and tears are coming up, right? Just noticing, are you allowing it, or are you trying to like breathe it away? That was my old technique. It was like, oh, here come the tears. Just take 3 deep breaths and make it stop. Like that was my old, like, hey, just suck it up. Be tough, Dani. Like tough girls and strong girls don't cry, right? So really just starting to pay attention to how you honor your emotions or don't honor your emotions or even feel them in your body is a huge part in this process as well.
Yeah, I think what really woke me up about the carnivore diet is, I've been an advocate for many, many years now, especially after my healing, but I also did the therapy side. So I didn't even think about that as a part of the play of the diet. But when COVID hit, you saw so many people online saying, I am no longer tied to a diet. And I noticed that I think people were all in this fight or flight. And I mean, rightfully so. We just learned about COVID and everyone was scared of like, what is this scary thing? And a lot of people, I think in that moment of fear, just said, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. And then once the peak of the fear of COVID subsided, then they kind of came back to a certain diet. But I wonder if a lot of these people really just need work on their trauma and what is causing them to find these constant diets or these new fads. It sounds like a lot of it is just people need to learn to start feeling again and accepting emotions. One thing that Brene Brown brings up is if you decide to lock up fear and all the scary vulnerability sides, well, then you also lock up joy and the abundance because they're all together. So 100%. What are some tools then that people can use to start maybe feeling that emotion? I know for me, once I couldn't use carbs, I literally had to sit down in these emotions that were so uncomfortable. I would be white knuckling it because I was like terrified of these emotions, but it got better after every single time.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I want to, I'll answer it in a second, but I want to comment on this COVID thing because what I really saw happening and understanding through the lens of like why we eat what we eat and the emotional component is this massive, massive trauma of feeling disconnected from our families, our friends, not being able to be in physical contact, get the hugs that we need to survive as human beings. Babies literally die if they're not hugged.
Yes.
So here we are as adults, like, still craving this physical contact, this connection with humans, eye to eye contact, that now we're being fearfully pushed away from each other. And side tangent for another day, of course, my thoughts on all of that. But, what that's actually doing psychologically to us is causing fear around one of our basic human needs of connection. Right. And this in itself is a trauma. Like, we have all been through a massive trauma together in the last 2 years, like all of us, everyone on the planet. And this installation of fear and uncertainty for most of us, right? That's something that maybe we also had in childhood, right? And of course, our patterns are going to come up of trying to cope through that because it brought up all of the really uncomfortable emotions, the uncertainty, the job loss, right? The fear of death, the fear of people leaving us or feeling disconnected or, fear of the uncertainty of the future, like all of our root foundations were just totally shaken, right? And stirred up. And the discomfort from that is something that we've not been taught, right? This is what I mentioned. So absolutely, the coping that we did to just drink our way through it or eat our way through it or switch diets or try, just throwing in the towel. And I will be the first to admit I was not perfect during COVID. There was definite emotional eating. And it's still something that shows up for me here and there, but I'm aware of it and I don't beat myself up about it. And I know how to get back on track and how to support myself with that. So it's still a growth journey for me. These patterns are really deeply rooted. So learning how to feel. So to answer your question now, how do we actually get into that? And the first thing that I would say is to bare minimum, very first thing is just to start asking yourself every day how you feel. And a really, really good time to do this is right before you eat anything, because then you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're really starting to understand your patterns around why you're eating what you eat, and then also giving yourself a chance to just check in with how you're feeling. I mean, how many of us go throughout our days and our weeks without ever taking a minute to stop and pause? One of the most powerful things, and it's so simple, I don't know why we don't all do it all the time, is just to stop and close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. And my favorite thing, this is how I start all of my coaching sessions, and is really like even just putting a hand on your heart, putting a hand on your lower belly or your womb space, your creative center, and just closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths. And when those 3 deep breaths are over, just saying, how's my body feeling today? Right? And just listening to what's coming up. Maybe you're feeling stressed. A big thing to point out here, especially for anyone who's listening that can't quite identify emotions, because this is kind of a phase that I've really noticed with a lot of my clients. There's like this, I don't know what sadness feels like, or not being able to label an emotion because we have been so disconnected from this part of our body. So really important place to start there is just noticing the physical sensations. So maybe you feel like tightness in your neck, or maybe your hip hurts today, or maybe you're feeling a little bloated. Those are all feelings as well. So just tuning in, again, it's really a practice over time of asking your body what's going on and just taking a minute. Like I'm a huge believer in closing your eyes because it takes away all the outward thinking and it helps you drop into your heart, right? And it helps you really drop into you and building that relationship with yourself, even just 30 seconds here and there throughout the day, not only calms your nervous system and supports your stress levels, which is a win-win, right? Especially anyone out there who's a stress eater like me, but it helps us really invite in that connection with our body, right? Because most of us are living out here all day long, right? Externally, giving, doing, working, driving, cooking, this, that, and dropping in and starting to just take a minute to ask what we need, what we're feeling. Those are probably some of the 2 biggest, most profound questions that we've never asked ourselves. So that's the easiest place to start, is just do that every day, even if it's once a day in the morning when you wake up, or at night before you go to bed, or in the middle of the day, while you're waiting in traffic. Obviously don't close your eyes while you're driving.
Yeah. And one thing I hear from some very busy people will be, well, I live such a stressed life, or my job is really stressful, or my marriage is, not so great, but I can't change any of those things. So are they able to still heal maybe some of this emotional side without being able to fix some of these kind of bigger rocks?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to push a little bit on this for all of you thinking that, because I totally hear this as well. And I would challenge you when you say you can't change these things. Is that actually true? Because we, as much as we don't want to accept this as humans, we create our reality. And you made a choice at some point to be in that relationship, to say yes to that job, to be in the situation that you're in. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. So I'm sharing that with a lot of love to really see like, okay, I have made decisions in my life to put me in this situation. So that also means that we can choose, and it may be really difficult, but we can choose to navigate out of those things when we're learning that they no longer serve us. And I share this from very personal experience, because a big part of my journey and where I was really at rock bottom with my emotional eating was when I was working an office job about 7 years ago for one of the biggest banks here in Canada. And I thought I was being all successful, and it was the most miserable 2 years of my life. And I would come home every day absolutely depressed, drink a bottle of wine, eat a pizza, live in the bath, watch Netflix, go to bed, repeat. And it was the ultimate numbing out cycle that was affecting my health, my relationship with my husband, my happiness. I was just depressed and miserable. And I chose to say yes to that job. And at the same time, when I realized that, I chose to quit. So 2 years in, that's when, I decided there's more to life, and I made the choice to quit. And this is when we traveled and I went through my accidental detox. That was all around that time. And now I run my own business and I'm living life on my terms and making the choices from an empowered point of what I actually want to do in this world and how I actually want to show up. So I know this is possible for everyone, no matter your circumstance. I know that it's not easy. It's extremely difficult. It might take years to unfold, but it's possible. So I just want to challenge that. And then at the same time, while you're maybe thinking about those bigger rocks and those bigger picture of, wow, maybe I do need a divorce. Maybe I do want to leave my job. Maybe there are things that I do need to change and accept that these are no longer serving me anymore. And while you're sitting with that, and like I said, that might take time. You don't have to do that all right now. Please don't do that. Like, spend time feeling into that and thinking about it, making a plan for yourself, making sure you're safe in that journey. While you do that, you can also choose, and sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we can choose how we see things. So we can absolutely choose, maybe there's a situation that you're like, okay, yeah, I don't love my job and I can see that I'm out of alignment here, but I'm not ready to quit. And I want to just kind of manage it in a different way. We can choose, if we're coming from a place of love and empowerment, how we actually see those situations and how we actually work on them. So, okay, is there a way that I can maybe learn to enjoy my job better? Are there boundaries that I can set with my boss so I don't feel so resentful every day that I leave from the office, right? Or is there work that I need to do with my partner or my husband, right? That can bring us closer together. Maybe there's some things that we could work on together. Maybe he's open to couples therapy, or maybe, so we can come at it with the lens of, again, asking those questions of what could I change here? How could I see this situation differently and actually have acceptance for it if that's what we choose, right? Versus, the resentment and the stress and the guilt and the shame. And I want to remind everybody that we do not have to put all of this stuff on our plate. I know there are so many women out there, and this has been a huge part of my journey, is actually learning to define my success and my worth as a human being, not by how much I do in a day, but by how I show up and how I feel every day, as opposed to how many things I got checked off my checklist, because this was how I operated my whole life. I'm a doer. I'm a type A personality. It was like, if I didn't have a huge list of things completed at the end of the day, I was a failure. I was worthless. Like, why bother living? And that took a lot of time to rewire and to shape and really ultimately learn to slow down. I knew very early on, like, if it wasn't the sugar that was going to kill me, it was the stress. I was chronically stressed, always anxious, always worried, and, tapping into what has developed over the last 6 years in my spiritual journey, learning to meditate, learning to slow down, learning not to push myself all the time and not to define myself and my worth as a woman by, all the things I get done, have probably been some of the most profound, healing for me. And now I'm no longer running around totally fried and burnt out, using food to cope and get through the day and to give me energy. It's easier for me to eat healthy, right? And to support myself when I'm not, at my wit's end all day long.
Just to add to all of what you said, I think it even takes sometimes a third person or like a therapist or something to even define, is this job worth me staying in? Is it a mind shift thing that I need? Or is it truly that this job is not meant for me? And I think it takes perspective. And sometimes when we're in the thick of it, we can justify it. I mean, I had a very similar story to you. I was in management consulting for over a decade. I was making very good money, flying around the world for free, but I was miserable. And I dated someone that was in the same space. And he says, it seems like you like all the perks of the job, but it seems like you hate the actual job. And then he really got me thinking of, I actually really do hate this job. And sure, the perks are fun, the golden handcuffs, as I used to call them, but I was miserable. And when I couldn't say no to my boss or the CEO of a big company, I would end up binging at night because that was how I was de-stressing. And once I got married to my husband and I hit rock bottom, we had this conversation of, well, I need to go back to work because we have a family to feed. And yes, my husband made money, but do we change our life? But what about my kids' future? But for the betterment of my health, I still chose to let go of that job, even though it was so scary. And knowing that maybe nutrition, I mean, the average nutritionist makes pretty little money, but that felt right in my heart, that God's plan was for me to go this way. And it was so unbelievably scary. I thought I was failing my child as a mother and being able to afford a family or a lifestyle, but it was the best decision I ever made, because I work probably more hours now than I did then, and I worked a lot then, but never once do I feel like, oh, I hate this job or I hate what I'm doing. I just feel like I wish I had more time in the day. But if anything, it's so healing. And then my husband can always say, I think you need a break. And so some days on a full day, I won't do any work because I need that break. And before, I would never have been able to do that, like you said. But now I have this balance where I could say, okay, I just need to get away from the computer, get away from everything related to nutrition and wellness. And I need to feel myself again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful, Judy. Thanks for sharing that. That really resonates with me. And it really makes me think of one of these sort of side benefits that I always just love. Like this is one of the coolest things about the work I do is, and actually the program that I'm running right now, at the time of recording this, there's 2 women in that group who are having this epiphany as well, because we haven't talked too much about this, but a really big part of this work that we're doing is actually reclaiming who we are. And this loss of identity that we have all really been forced to shape into this box that society puts us in. And this is one of the big wounds that Gabor Mate talks a lot about, is like in childhood, how we're taught to fit into this box, right? We're taught to don't be too pretty or too smart and don't be too we're taught how to fit in society, right? And be good little followers of the rules. And in that process, we strip away our identity and our uniqueness and our weirdness and our silliness and our freedom to really be who we are, right? We learn to dress conservative or act a certain way and don't say certain things. And, I'm not saying that all of that is bad, but I am saying that it drastically disconnects us from who we truly are. And now what I see, every single woman that comes to work with me is completely lost. They have no idea who they are. This is where the term midlife crisis comes from. People are like, what is happening? Who am I? Right? And then we have this existential crisis where we have no idea what the meaning of life is and who we are. And this is a huge part in learning how to reconnect with our truth and our wisdom and our intuition and our true selves through play, through exploration, through self-love practices, through belief systems, so all of this. So one of the side benefits of doing this inner healing and this real root cause healing with food is that you're going to start to very clearly notice where you're out of alignment in your life. And I know we're talking about that in relationships or in jobs. And this happens every time I host a program. There is a woman by the end of the program who decides to quit her job. She's like, I just realized that I am miserable and I am totally out of alignment. That's the terms that we use, right? This is not a match for me. And I can actually follow my dreams. And wow, that's really actually exciting now. And yes, there's fear there because it's going to be growth and learning and it's going to be challenging, but it's worth it. And I know that I can do it now. So there's a sense of confidence, right? Where we break out of our dream state that most of us walk around in every day and start living in the world of possibilities and really living from what our heart wants us to do. Right. And for both of us, that's nutrition, right? But for someone else, listening to this, it might be something completely different, right? So it's a very neat, side effect of doing this healing is as you connect more with your truth and who you really are, you start to realize the areas in your life that aren't really a reflection of that. And, some changes need to be made. And for me, it was my job. It was also a huge group of friends, that I no longer associate with because they weren't, on the same path as me or what I needed and wanted. And that was extremely difficult and extremely challenging and a huge opportunity for growth for me to completely shift, the people in my life and continue to do that from a place of loving myself and making that choice for me to surround myself with people that support me, right? And that want to lift me up and get what I'm working towards. So there's a lot of little side benefits that come when you actually commit to doing this healing. And doesn't just shift your relationship with sugar, right? It is so beyond sugar. Actually, in my programs, we don't even talk much about sugar. We're like, okay, let's get into the deep stuff and as soon as you start to heal that, you'll start to notice like, oh, okay, it's actually easier to eat healthy and I don't even care about sugar anymore. I don't even want it. And my relationship with my husband's getting better. And oh, my kids want to eat healthy. And oh, I'm feeling more aligned and connected in my job. Or like the deep stuff that we do affects all areas, all relationships in our life, whether it's people or food or something else.
Yeah, I think the system, whatever that means, the way that we're raised really just starts making us question the abilities of humans in general. I mean, we think about COVID and all the lockdowns, and we were bound to our homes because we couldn't go out, we shouldn't socialize or communicate. But as humans, we automatically, you saw on social media, on the news, or maybe not corporate news, but on other places or platforms, you saw how people still try to connect, right? People were singing in the windows to connect, and you would hear unisons of music and stuff so that people still felt connection. And it just shows you the resiliency of humans. And if we were to just trust that if our inner desire is to do something else with our life or get out of a marriage, even if we have young children, which is such a common thing I hear. But you talk a lot about your program and it sounds even wonderful to me. But if you can share a little bit about, what does that look like? So if I'm listening to this and I feel like this is really resonating with me, maybe all these diets. So what does a group therapy or program look like working with you so that you can start healing?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. The timing of this, I believe, is pretty neat because I'm just about to open up registration for my next group here in the new year. So, and I believe Judy's going to have a link for that if anyone wants to get on the wait list below the episode. So my signature program is called the Break Free from Sugar program. And like we've already been talking about, it's so much more than just sugar. So it's a 10-week program that actually navigates you through understanding your unique root patterns and causes. And when I say unique, I don't really mean unique because we're all kind of the same. And every time I host this program, I see that we all have the same problems. We all have the same, patterns or traumas or belief systems that are holding us back that really need to be shed. So the process that we go on over that 10 weeks is through our weekly meetings and weekly content and work in that process is really connecting yourself to your body, connecting yourself to your emotions, connecting to your true identity, understanding yourself in a really, really deep way, and learning how to have self-compassion and ultimately think and act differently. So, like I said, at the time of recording this, I'm actually in the last week of my current program and just watching the way that women are handling and showing up for themselves, learning to say no, setting boundaries, like learning to actually be in their power and be unapologetic about it and really just show up different for themselves and think different, even if they accidentally have some sugar, instead of beating themselves up and binging for the next week, it's, oh, oops, okay, whatever, I'm getting back to it. So this sense of freedom that can unfold for you when you have the right community. And one of the things that I do very uniquely in this space, I'm sure you do this as well, Judy, is providing an actual safe space. So like I mentioned earlier, this inner healing and the wounds and the pain that we have kept hidden from ourselves and our partners and the world for so long are really tender places. We as women especially have definitely been burned. Like a lot of us have been re-traumatized by, say, trying to be vulnerable or sharing something and then being met with non-support or judgment or shame. And then we learn to close up harder, right? Our walls go up stronger because, okay, it's not safe to share. So to be together in a community of women and be witnessed in your pain without judgment in itself is one of the most powerful pieces of the way that I lead in the program that I host, is like getting to actually learn how to speak your truth and be vulnerable and be met with love and support and just this safe network of other women witnessing your journey and relating with you is so powerfully healing. And in that process, we do 4 weeks sugar-free. We do bring in the physical part. We do talk about food. We do definitely detox from sugar. Most of the women at the end of the 4 weeks want to keep going, but I like having that kind of 4-week minimum because it's easier to wrap our head around to actually jump in and get started. And in that process, like I said, we're really, really, really deeply rewiring these very, very deep wounds and learning how to feel again. And really a lot of these pieces that we talked about today. So this is, it's a lot. It's a lot in 10 weeks, but it works. This will be about the 8th time that I've hosted this program, and it is my passion and my heart. And I'm so excited to host another round.
So what about men? Do you ever serve any men?
Good question. I don't actually, I don't work with men. I've chosen to really, really focus in on my own experience, right?
Sure.
I can only speak to being a woman and the hormones and the challenges and the body shame and the things that I've personally gone through. So the way I lead is very much from my personal experience and obviously my training. So that's kind of hard for me to do with men because I've never been in a man's body. So that's not something that I do right now. My groups are, and I find especially for doing this deep healing work, the group must be like, and I totally am. It really, really encourage men being in men's groups. My husband's in a men's group. It's extremely healing for him. I think there's something so powerful and extra safe about being in groups that are, in alignment with kind of how we resonate. I want to mention one thing too here, because one of the things that I've seen that's really neat, and as much as I would love to work with men, and I definitely am not saying that men don't deserve help. I know there are a lot of great people out there who can support you, and I actually have some great friends. So reach out to me if you need some recommendations. I have people in my network that definitely work with men and support men. But there's also this side benefit what I've chosen, right? And as I work with women, it always, always, always ripples into their husbands and into their kids and their parents and their friends. Like there is such a ripple effect when we personally choose to do the healing. And I feel like in the household, that catalyst is really powerfully coming from the woman, because more often than not, the women are doing the cooking or, looking after the children more. And, that dynamic is there. So it's very neat for me to always witness, women who either are single or, in a partner, they'll notice the men in their life start to be curious about like, well, what are you eating? Or why do you have so much energy? Why is your skin clear? Why are you sleeping better? I want that. And then they start to get on board as well. And it just benefits the whole family that way. So that's how I try to support, through the ripple effect.
This is a lot of information. I think it was such good information, but it can be overwhelming. And one thing I just want to say is before we leave is the hard talk and the real talk is really, yes, this is a lot of hard work and you have to get into areas you'd rather just not deal with, and we can mute ourselves with food. But ultimately, somebody will have a rock bottom moment. And it's at that moment of, do you want to either deal with disease and just try to medicate it? Or maybe you work on it now and you free yourself of a lot of these difficult things from the past so that you don't have to forever find a new diet, find a new way to fit into your genes, and find a new way to deal with emotions or mental fog. And I know it's so unbelievably hard. I mean, it literally took me to land up in the mental hospital for me to finally change my way of everything. But I'd rather most people not get there before they find healing, because I literally failed as a mom. I feel that my healing, it's the calling, just like for you, it's to share, like, you don't have to go through that to find healing and to live a life that you were meant to. And that can really ultimately bring you happiness instead of trying to self-soothe, living a life you don't want to, but soothing with food that's slowly killing you, whether mentally or physically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a powerful message. I totally agree with everything that you just said. And I want to add to that in reminding everybody that, yes, what we're talking about may be hard work. And it actually, not maybe, it's definitely going to be hard work. I'm not going to lie to you. I never sugarcoat it, pun intended, but it's hard work. And it is by far the most rewarding work I've ever done in my whole life. Like, I will never, ever change like the deep emotional healing and the deep rewiring and life that I am following now. This is my new addiction. Like, healing myself is my new addiction. And I love it. And in the beginning, it was hard because I didn't know how to support myself with it. And I didn't have the proper support networks. And now I do. And now I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not difficult. I know how to support myself when things come up, or when there's new, like, I'm going through a huge phase of growth right now, and it's really, really difficult and really painful, and I'm okay. And I'm going to get through it. And I know that it's like, this is just the next phase for me to grow into the next version of myself. So just a reminder that it does get easier. It does become this new way of being that you're growing and learning, and you can like compassionately navigate your way through that. And it opens up this huge portal of abundance, of freedom and peace. This unlocking of your emotions and of this healing that exists comes with, yes, it comes with some pain and some difficult things, but it also equally comes with more peace, more happiness, more joy, more freedom, more literally feeling alive and engaged in life, as opposed to walking around in a slumber all the time. So this journey is really about coming alive, right? And reconnecting with ourselves and with the world and whatever higher power you believe in. And it's such a beautiful gift to yourself to do that work. I feel like we're here on the planet to do some work, right? So buck up and let's do it, right? And it doesn't have to be difficult. And if you're being guided by the right people and have the right support networks, and this is, one of the last things that I want to mention is how vital it is to pay attention to who you surround yourself with. Because very quickly, like you were saying, Judy, right? It's so easy to go to a party and everybody's shaming you for not having a drink or not having a cookie. And that was what I experienced. And one of the reasons why I shifted my group of friends in a dramatic way was not wanting to be with people like that anymore, right? And really noticing like, okay, are the people that I'm around lifting me up energetically, emotionally? Are they supporting my goals? Are they cheering me on? Or are they trying to drag me back down because of their own, there's reasons why people do that, right? There's a lot of psychological reasons. So don't be afraid to make new friends, right? And really pay attention to your community. And sometimes it's your husband's not your main support network, or your parents aren't your cheerleader, right? Or your best friend that you thought was going to be there for you just doesn't have the capacity, and that's okay. Find people that will. Like the people that you surround yourself with are absolutely vital in your success in the long run.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where can people find you? I'll put in the show notes your link for your program, but where can people find you, your program, social media, podcast?
Yes, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Judy. This was so much fun. I knew this would be a good conversation too. We never know what's going to come out, but this was fantastic. So anyone that wants to connect with me, please, I would love to hear from you. My website is danielledaem.com. I'm at Danielle Daem Coaching on Facebook. Danielle Daem on Instagram. I also have a podcast that Judy has been a guest on called Beyond Sugar Freedom Podcast. And that's probably a really great place to get started, maybe learning a bit more about what I do and the approach that I take to healing our relationship with food. And yes, of course, if you're interested in the next round of my program, I only host this program twice a year. So this is really cool timing. Don't wait, come and get on the wait list. Judy, you'll have the link below and you can learn more about the program when I open registration very, very soon.
Okay. And then out of curiosity, do you do one-on-ones outside of those group programs?
I don't actually. Okay. Last year I made a big shift because just managing my time.
Yes.
And I'll be really honest with all of you. What I really notice in this deep healing work is we heal better in community.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So I noticed this big time, and this sounds funny coming from me because obviously one-on-one coaching with me is really powerful and really important, and it's a high investment. But I will be the first to say that the results that my clients have gotten from the group versus one-on-one have been next to none. There's no comparison. And within, actually, and I'll say this too, because give a little teaser for everybody about this program, but the way that I do, for anybody who does want one-on-one support with me, because it is definitely really powerful to have some one-on-one time to go into your unique life and your unique story and situation. I always offer a VIP package with my program. So there's always a couple spots available for people who are going through the group experience to have a couple sessions with me as well, one-on-one. So that's always an option that I'll be releasing info soon.
Okay. Well, I'll put all the information in the show notes, but thank you so much for joining me. This was such a pleasure. And I think honestly, if people are willing to go all the way to a carnivore diet, some people will need that support to really just get to next level in terms of why maybe a diet's not sticking long-term.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Judy. I love having these conversations, and I just want to shout it from the rooftop and let everybody know that this is possible. This healing is possible. And you don't have to be on this diet, guilt, shame roller coaster for the rest of your life. You can actually do the deep inner healing that's really, really causing these patterns and addictions, and then get on with living life, right?
Right. And living the life that you're meant to live, one that will be in sync with you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So powerful. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me. Okay, guys, I hope that this interview provided you a lot more tools that is beyond nutrition. Sometimes just sticking to a diet is so important in finding that consistency. But oftentimes when we are having trouble with sugar addiction and other things that are related to food, it's not just about the food itself. Sometimes it's the way that we cope. And I hope that this conversation starts giving you levers to help you heal from these things that maybe we're not aware of when it comes to food addiction. I hope you guys learned a lot just as much as I have. Okay, guys, you know the drill. Make sure to eat a lot of meat. Take care of your bodies because it is the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.